So welcome to the webinar with Ben Howell. So we'll be looking at starting a career in the London insurance market. Today we will be covering the industry and the London market, diversity, insurance careers, how to find a role, and look at other people's successes within the Lloyds Military Network. So I'll hand over to Ben now, who can introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for tuning in. My name is Ben Howell. I'm currently a technical and change manager of a program running in the Lloyds or the London commercial insurance market, more of which later. A little bit about my background. Commissioned into the Royal Artillery in 1993. Left at the end of 2015 as a lieutenant colonel. Did the Lloyds Military Network internship, which I'll describe in more detail later on. Wonderful springboard into the London insurance market. And my first job was with one of the firms that hosted me on my internship, which was JLT, or Jardine Lloyd Thompson, which is a large international commercial insurance broking firm based here in London and elsewhere around the globe. I spent 3 months there. I continued to network and look around me, and I saw a really, really juicy opportunity for some advancement, for some more responsibility, for a little bit more cash. And so I jumped to an initiative called Placing Platform Limited. Massively uninspiring title, but the purpose of that company, Placing Platform, which is a change program and an incorporated company, bizarrely and almost uniquely, is to digitize the placement of risk in the London market, which for 350 years, since Thomas Lloyd opened his coffee shop, has been somewhere where brokers arrive and put risks in front of underwriters on paper, or on vellum and then paper. And now we are 40% electronic. And by the end of Q2 this year, we'll be over 50% electronic. And then we are a digital insurance market seeking to rid ourselves of the last vestiges of paper. So the conversation changes. So actually it's pretty seismic. It's pretty key. It opens up to global access. It makes it far more efficient, potentially more profit, etc., etc. So I sit on the board of the Lloyds Military Network, which means that people who come through our applications process for our internship will probably meet with me as part of their application, and I will be one of a number of people considering that application and providing them a place. Out with work, I also am a training and education panel member for Crisis, the homeless charity, and I sit every month giving microloans to people to help them with training, education, starting their own businesses, the tools they need, etc., to once they're brought out of homelessness by Crisis. And, you know, that sort of social responsibility piece is clearly something you don't always have time for in the military, but something that's looked upon pretty well by any other civilian employee. Esme, could you go up to the next slide?
Yes, thank you. So we were also meant to be joined by Alex, who unfortunately isn't well tonight. But Ben, if you wanted to introduce Alex anyway, share a bit about her history.
Alex and I were going to jointly present, just to reinforce something that I'll talk about later in terms of diversity, but also because Alex's experience is different to mine. She's far more qualified than I am. I haven't got a decent educational qualification to my name. She did far shorter a time in the army than I did, only 5 years. And she's already now making a real progress in her career as an underwriter. So I'm in Lloyds. I'm dealing with change at a market level, and she works for a market firm. And she's an ex-AGC SPS officer. So no offshore energy background. She wasn't, she didn't work on an oil rig or anything, but really, good example of transferable skills. And she's forging ahead, working for Star Underwriters at the moment. Yeah, like I say, can't be with us. The idea is, we're not after middle-class white men. We're after middle-class white men, and everyone else decides. And we think it's very important. Okay, so moving on to the scope of the presentation then.
Yes, so the insurance industry, Ben. So I think you've got 10 facts here that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so this slide's a little bit old now, but I think it tells the story anyway. So, I mean, London, if you're looking sort of in rough numeric order from top left, London is the oldest insurance market in the world. Insurance began with shipping, with boats. And it began in the Thames with something that are now known as P&I companies, or protection indemnity firms. Essentially, the captains of ships grouped together and said, look, if one of us goes down and people survive, who's paying for their ship? Who's paying for the families? Who's doing all of that good stuff? Why don't we all put money in a pot so we all pay for each other when it goes wrong? And so marine insurance is the oldest brand of insurance, the oldest class of business of insurance. It's where Lloyd started. We're not the biggest because we're not in the biggest market, although we are globally accessible. But what we do have is this huge heritage, tradition and reputation. And a lot of people will come to Lloyd's, even though Lloyd's might be more expensive than other places, purely based on that, purely based on the fact that they want to have their risks underwritten in Lloyd's. And as a consequence, we give a huge amount to UK GDP, as shown in sort of box number 2, and we underwrite. So the market exposure to risk is in the trillions, which is absolutely massive. Clearly, that's managed. Were all that to come in at once, Britain would be a significantly poorer place. But a massive amount of gross written premium and risk under management. Lots and lots of people employed in the London insurance market or in the Lloyds market and what's called the company market. Together they make up the London insurance market, and clearly they nearshore things, which means that they might have offices elsewhere in the UK. When you add up, large brokers like Willis Towers Watson have office in Ipswich, Marsh in Norwich, JLT in Birmingham, and on, across the country, commercial insurance employs in the hundreds of thousands. So it's a huge employer. 40 million paid out each day in motor and property claims. Now, there's a bit of a gap there, actually. It's interesting. When you go onto Direct Line and insure your car, Direct Line then have, a significant proportion of all the cars in the UK insured with them. They then seek insurance for that undertaking that they've got. They've got a significant exposure to risk. So they go and reinsure that into us. So ultimately, Lloyd's pays out or one of the Lloyd's underwriting firms, one of the carriers, pays out your car claim in terms of reinsurance from that 1.9 trillion under management. And there's some other figures around what we paid out in terms of, the ABTA underwritten travel agency insurance when flights are cancelled, and so on and so forth. One thing that's quite interesting is number 10. Clearly, with cyber, this is going up. Fraudulent claims from people who say, "Yeah, I lost my bag. It had 3 laptops and an iPad in it," but also people who never lost their bag in the first place, and sort of cyber and what have you. As the market becomes increasingly electronic, the ability to fraudulently play with insurance, much like people do with banking electronically, to hack it, etc., becomes greater, and that's something I in particular look at. That's roughly it. Lots of big numbers, lots of people employed, lots of turnover, and Lloyd's is still doing well despite catastrophic hurricanes last year in North America on the eastern seaboard, which resulted in a lot of payouts. And despite the uncertainty of Brexit, the market continues to thrive. Buildings are going up, firms are coming to work here, and there's still a buzz about the place, particularly as we digitize, we become electronic, we become more accessible. So it's still somewhere that I'd say is a good place to work, that has a future that is not declining but thriving despite global uncertainty.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. On to the London insurance market. You've got some figures, some history, and the future of the market. We've
covered some of the figures, but it's important to say that it's a fifth of the economy in the city, and that's up against the banks, that's up against the whole investment piece, private equity, venture capital, etc. It's up against any other large, headquarters, corporates that are based in London. So it's a significant proportion of the city. 48,000 within EC3, pretty much within the square mile. 10% of global commercial insurance, which is a pretty healthy slice of global commercial insurance. Given that Singapore and Tokyo and Chicago and New York and significant other hubs are competing with Lloyd's for a slice of that market. And we do even better on reinsurance. Reinsurance is where the major amounts of money are. Insurers insure themselves with reinsurers, and that's big business. And we actually have a slightly bigger slice of the pie there, and we're retaining that. Like I said, started with Mr. Lloyd's coffee shop in 1688, naval history. We insured the Titanic. We insured Ronaldo's legs. I think Lloyd's insured Rowan Atkinson's McLaren F1 that he then smashed up. Obviously, the Titanic went down. So, some good risks and some bad. But people, like I say, people come here to insure peculiar and unique things at Lloyd's because of its history and its reputation. What's our future? Well, I suppose this is the bit that's most interesting. I think the London commercial insurance market, and I'm not alone in this, is pale, male, and stale. And you could obviously argue that I fall into that category myself. It's old. It needs to attract younger talent, and I think it's doing so. Clearly, it competes with other financial services and other careers in that respect. It's male. You walk around here, most people are men in trench coats at this time of year with folders under their arms, going about their business. But again, there's lots of girls, and that female quotient is going up. And it needs to diversify in other ways. Lloyd's pushes something called the Dive-In Festival each year, Diversity Festival, which, along with partners like Stonewall, celebrates the LGBTQ+ community. And there are events for all sorts of minorities throughout the year. And I'll touch on diversity on the next slide, so I'll move on from there. Modernisation I've already covered to some degree. PPL is just one of the initiatives, the digital placing initiative, one of the initiatives in the market. Clearly the market is embracing as best it can blockchain and machine learning and other aspects of AI, deep data, etc., etc. The market produces vast amounts of data every year, which has value, needs to be mined, analysed, turned into tools with which to do business. And that's something that the market, both led by Lloyd's and as individual firms, are all doing. Clearly, all the firms want the market to move forward, but also want to retain their own competitive edge. So there's a bit of a tension there, but that's only a good thing. One of the things that the market needs to do as well is to modernise in the sense of removing something called Londonisms, whereby traditions and habits have built up over hundreds of years, which might make the placing of insurance for people who aren't used to them difficult, and that reduces accessibility. And so part of modernisation is making ourselves a more vanilla market without reducing some of the tradition and the brand strength that we have. So getting rid of those Londonism idiosyncrasies is important. Clearly, with data, with cyber comes GDPR and other regulatory pressures, and we have to deal with those. We've had Solvency II, we've had GDPR, we've had other things thrust upon us. So, and I don't see regulation becoming any less onerous. And even if we leave the European Union, and regardless of how we leave it, I've no doubt then that the government will play with regulation. And even if it changes for the better, it's still change the market has to deal with. And then, of course, you've got Brexit. Like I say, we're doing well in the face of Brexit. Uncertainty continues. And and this is the key bit, if other sectors aren't doing new things, like building new factories or embarking on new initiatives, setting up new offices or what have you, then they're not insuring those new things. So potentially Brexit has an indirect effect on the market in that other sectors of industry not pushing forward means they're not insuring new things. And so that hits us. So the future is not clear, but I think it's largely positive. I'm certainly someone who thinks that their decision to enter insurance with the support of the Lloyds Military Network was not foolish, because the future looks pretty bright, certainly in my line of work. And I would suspect also in Alex's, and if she were here, she'd be saying the same thing.
Thank you, Ben. So we've just had a question come in thinking about diversity. So would being a white male be a negative factor on a potential internship application, obviously with standing upholding the requirement of employment law?
Well, employment law is clearly primary in all of this, and the answer is absolutely no. So why don't we get on to the next slide and maybe talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah.
And answer that question in the context of the next slide, which talks about the sort of value of diversity. All right, so look, there's a picture of the Dive-In Festival I mentioned earlier. And then on the right, there's a picture of the front cover of a report done by the McKinsey & Company, probably known to many of you as a leading strategy house consultancy firm. And they and many, many others, including militaries around the world and other organizations, have all done research into the value of diverse teams and diverse approaches and diverse backgrounds, and have concluded that it produces better results. And so just for 1 second, if we get down to brass tacks, forget trying to get on Stonewall's top 100, which interestingly Lloyds is on, as is the Navy, the Air Force and the Army, or doing it because it's the right thing to do. If you're just concentrating on profit, then it's also the right thing to do for the bottom line. All right, so there's more than one good reason why firms want to become more diverse. Reputationally, it's good, but it's good for the bottom line as well, and it's also probably the right thing to do. Does that disadvantage you as a white male? Absolutely not. Diversity includes white males as well as everything else. White heterosexual middle-class males is just one part of the whole thing. So not at all. Don't worry. And on the Lloyds Military Network, absolutely not. I mean, I can't speak for firms I don't know about. I can only do so in circumspect terms. But for the Lloyds Military Network, of which I'm on the board, I can tell you categorically that it will not count against you. What's interesting is that we have embraced the way the market is going in the network. The market is saying that we want to be more diverse, and the network, as a good market citizen, has said, okay, we'll attempt to uphold that as well. The pond we fish from in the military, though, clearly is not as diverse as it could be either, and we're aware of that. And we don't mind that, because actually the primary thing here is introducing military talent to the Lloyds market, which means that the network has a burnished reputation as a purveyor of talented people who have all of the wonderful qualities that the military bestows upon them and have in themselves. And it also continues to reinforce our brand and our reputation. If that talent is not white male, then so much the better. But certainly, you know, no disadvantage.
Okay, and we just had another question, which I think is probably a bit more personal to your transition, Ben. But after the forces, when you were looking for employment, were there any other areas you were considering, or sort of what drew you to the Lloyds Military Network?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, do you know what? When I look back, you know, I remember going to the career transition partner, the CTW workshop, and they said, you know, where do you want to be in 5 years? What's your 5-year plan? And I said, well, look, I've been in the Army for 23 years. I joined when I was 18. I only know the military. I've been in the Army for longer than I haven't. I've no bloody idea what I want to do in 2 years, let alone 5. And so I thought, well, I'll probably be a management consultant. That was the first port of call, and I went and saw some of the big four and got talking to them. One of my friends who works for Willis Towers Watson, which is a large broker, an American broker, said, hey, why don't you have a look at insurance, and gave me some names. And before I knew it, I was in touch with what was then a very embryonic Lloyds Military Network. And they said, well, look, we're starting up this internship thing. Why don't you do it? We can give you 2 months with two firms, a month with a broker and a month with an underwriter, and go and learn about insurance. Could be a job at the end of it. So I was the third person to go through. And at that point, I basically just surfed the wave I was on, and here I am. And actually, like I said earlier, the second firm that I went to for my intern, both offered me jobs. One offered me one in Singapore, which I couldn't do at the time. One offered me a job in London, which I took.
Great.
Yeah.
I think
answer the question.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thanks. And I think it ties in nicely with the next slide. Just thinking about a diverse career in insurance. Obviously, there's lots of different roles people could go into. So if you want to just explore that a bit.
Yeah, so what I tried to do with this slide is just talk about the process of insurance first, and then how diverse it actually is in terms of opportunities, career opportunities within it. So you have a client. Let's say that our client is British Airways. British Airways flies aircraft. There's a whole bunch of risks associated with flying aircraft. First of all, there's aircraft hull, which is the risk to the aircraft itself, be it falling out of the sky or bumping into something in the airport. You're going to have cargo in that aircraft, so then you have a cargo risk. Cargo's got a value independent of the aircraft. You want to insure that. If you've got people on board, then you carry those people and you have certain liabilities as to their welfare, so you have liability insurance. The pilots on board have professional indemnity insurance for pilots to ensure that they're insured against mistakes, etc., etc. An aircraft firm also has directors and officers for its C-suite people. It has buildings, so it has buildings insurance. And if the snow means it can't, or terrorism or what have you means it can't fly for 3 days, it has business interruption insurance. So it's got vast exposure to insurance. So the client approaches the broker, large broker in London, big program of varied insurance. And that broker, that aviation broker, because that's what it will be on this occasion, seeks then to place the program of insurance for the next 12 months for British Airways in the London market. And the London market is a subscription market, which means that rather than insuring the whole thing with one insurer, you can spread the risk across a number of insurers. So he'll go and see the broker, he'll go and see Hiscox and AXA XL and AIG and Allianz and other large commercial insurers, and he will spread the risk over as many subscribers to that risk as he can. And he will do so with the interests of the client in mind. So he'll be looking for the right terms and conditions, the right packages, the right premium, etc., etc. And then that all gets signed and closed. And so the broker can return to the client with a bunch of documents and say, look, here are all your various certificates of insurance. Your entire program across all of those classes of business are now underwritten. They are on risk. You are insured. Go about your operations knowing you've transferred significant risk to third parties. Okay. Those insurers then have taken on board all that risk. Okay. They then need to insure themselves. So they go and find a reinsurer. And the reinsurer then insures those insurers for a premium again. And the reinsurers then conduct retrocession, and they retrocede some of their risks to other parties too. Maybe to people like Warren Buffett, who's got a lot of money, so he'll take on a lot of risk. Okay, he's not an insurer, but he's an investment fund. He's essentially investing in insurance then. He'll take on a lot of risk, charge money for it, and at the end of the day, he's got some billions that he pays out if there's a disaster.
Ben, sorry, had thinking about being a broker, a question come in saying, what value does a broker add other than being the interface between client and underwriter?
Well, a broker adds, sure. A broker adds, a broker adds a hell of a lot of value. Okay, so if you're a client and you go direct to an insurer, that insurer is going to say, insure with me. I'm the best. I understand you. Here's my policy. Do that. Okay. And you can either then expend lots and lots of effort visiting lots and lots of insurance firms, or you can go and see a broker who says, I understand aviation. I understand your needs. I've been doing this for a number of years. I understand the aviation insurance market. I know who you need to best underwrite your particular risks. I know the insurer that will give you the best terms and conditions, a competitive premium, who pays well in the event of a claim, who has a good record for claims payment, who also is linked to a number of responders or other firms which can help reduce your risks. Part of the package might be that the broker will provide you with some risk consultancy to help you if you're a smaller airline, look at your risk exposure, make it more attractive and therefore drive down the premiums. Insurers won't do that. Brokers will. Insurers hate brokers for it, but brokers will do that. So think like this. Do you, as an individual, go and see Direct Line and someone else in Swinton and Green Flag and the AA and the RAC, or do you get on Compare the Market? Well, the chances are you probably go for your car insurance on Compare the Market. You put your details in once and Compare the Market comes back with a whole bunch of options. Compare the Market is a broker, and the service that Compare the Market is giving you and making it easier and in doing the hard yards for you is exactly what those commercial brokers are doing in the London market.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess just sum up in 3 words maybe, the core values or skills that a veteran could bring to these roles.
Sure. So broker, you're going to be people facing. So you need to be a bit of a salesman. You need to be pretty confident. You need to be good around people. You need to be someone who can empathize and understand quickly and that people put their trust in. Insurers are more analytical by and large. They are the people holding the risk. They're doing the maths. Is this a good risk? Do I know this? Do I know this firm? Do I know this? Do I know the risks associated with it? Do I know the routes they fly, the airports they fly to? Are they good? Are they dangerous? Are most of their routes in Africa, or are most of their routes in North America? What does that mean to me? What does that mean to my risk exposure? So insurers need to have analytics, a bit of maths about them. You're going to interact with risk analysts and actuaries and other things like that. And the same is true of reinsurance. Clearly, there is a role for insurers to sweet talk brokers into choosing them. So, a little bit of gift of the gab, sociability, extroversion will get you a long way there. But then you've got this kind of bracket underneath. All of these firms are, to use an army term, and forgive me, senior service and Air Force, but they're battle groups. Okay, a battle group is a unit that comes together, and it has been task organised for a specific mission, possibly around the cavalry or the infantry. But it's going to contain gunners and military police and engineers and intelligence corps and others who come together to deliver a coherent force. And the same is true of all of these firms. Within a broking firm, within an insurer, it doesn't matter. You're going to have legal, compliance, regulatory. You're going to have the C-suites. You've got the leadership. You've got the head shed. You're going to have analysts who are analysing trends in the aviation market. To continue our analogy, what are the new aircraft coming out? What advantages do they represent over the old aircraft? So how do we pitch that to, what's the specification of those? So the brokers understand them. So the next time they go and see their client, you've just bought the 777X and I know what it does, right? We're going to go, it's brand new, it's really reliable, and we're going to go and see the insurer about that. So analytics, IT, clearly everything is now underpinned by trying to do it electronically, trying to get the computer to do it for you, trying to get the data out of it to analyze, to understand how to be more competitive in future. Project management, every firm has change. All of those things involve change, regulation, compliance, IT, and what have you. So within the central operations component of any market firm, you're going to have a project management function with business analysts, project management office, change manager, program manager, director of operations, et cetera, and you're going to have operations and risk. What's our exposure in an underwriting firm in particular? What's our exposure? How do we manage it? And exposure in underwriting firms is fascinating. Geographic exposure. What have we insured in terms of property in a certain area? What happens if that area is overcome with hurricane and it all destroys? That's us, screwed. Thematic exposure. Have we insured too much terrorism risks in a particular place, or what have you? So all of those things, as well as HR. I didn't have much more room, but HR, buildings and maintenance. All of those things are part of those firms. People tend to come into insurance and they look at it in a binary fashion. Do I want to be a broker or an insurer? That is overly simplistic. There's a heck of a lot of colour. And just, sorry, Esme, I know you want to jump in, but just one last thing. For those of you who've sort of looked at things like control risks, Salama Fakira, Neil Young Associates, Ambry Risk and others, a lot of those responder firms that are there to do extraction or help in kidnap and ransom scenarios or provide risk management advice, a lot of those responder firms you will find have a huge insurance firms, carriers, underwriters, have a large stake in them because they provide some of the risk reduction services that might get you a better premium, but they also provide some of the response services that are part of the package. So if you get your kidnap and ransom insurance with Hiscox and you are kidnapped, the guys who are going to come and get you and pay the ransom will be from control risks because Hiscox has a large stake in control risks. So there's a huge responder insurer relationship going on as well. So it even extends into other parts, other sectors. Sorry, Esme.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Ben. So obviously plenty of opportunity there. So leads us on nicely to finding a role. We've also got a question about opportunities outside of the city or working abroad. So when thinking about finding a role, if you could just touch on that as well, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, there are. So like I said, you can work for a London insurance firm, but you can work in its not in London office. Thousands of people, as you've seen from the figures, are employed outside London doing back office tasks. Back office tasks, in terms of HR functions, analytical functions, and other bits and pieces. Perfectly good employment, working for great international firms, and then you can go and work. If you're working for Marsh in Norwich, Marsh are headquartered here down by the Tower of London. They've got a massive operation in Norwich. But Marsh are the world's largest insurance broker. Okay, a friend of mine who used to be Gurkha's has just come back from an extended period in Singapore with Marsh. They have a massive presence in New York. There's and they're not alone in that. There's countless firms with a global footprint. So yeah, absolutely, you can get posted elsewhere. If you work for Lloyds, the lady who does the comms in my team, she was in Singapore as well. Lloyds have just set up a brand new office in Brussels as part of their new Brexit stance. Plenty of opportunities for travel, plenty of opportunities for employment around the UK if you don't want to settle in London. I was speaking to a guy from Aviva yesterday. Aviva have got offices, I think, in Bristol. I'm trying to remember this now. Bristol, Norwich, because they used to be Norwich Union, York and Perth. So, if you want to go and work for Aviva, you can probably find somewhere near you to settle and work at one of their regional hubs. Plenty of opportunity.
Great, thank you. So actually finding the role, obviously you've got deciding what you want to do, approaching the market, and then refining your research. Ben, if you could just have a look at this in a bit more detail.
This sort of kind of transcends insurance a little bit now, I suppose, in terms of deciding what you want to do. There's a whole, what color is my parachute approach to who am I, what do I want, what do I want for my family, what are my priorities and all of that. But in terms of insurance, work-life balance, it can be quite consuming. There's a lot of social commitment, bottom bullet as well, which kind of feeds into this. It's a hard-working market. London, banking, financial services is competitive. There is a lot of chasing the dollars, chasing the pounds, get in early, work hard, maybe have some social, go home. Part of that. You need to think about that. Is that what you want? Plus the commute, probably, unless you're going to live, in central London, unless you can live in central London. I live in Wimbledon. I cycle in the morning. I do a pretty long day, cycle home in the evening, live for the weekend sort of stuff. And then go cycling at the weekend, probably too much of that. Anyway, it's transferable skill set. There's a lot of, like I've said, I think now if I've described the jobs and described the firms, the Lloyds Military Network has placed engineers in terrorism modelling and RAF in drone overflight, which helps modelling, and insurance, intelligence corps people in business analyst roles. So some, I know an engineer at JLT, he used to be an ATO, he's doing terrorism bomb modelling using some really snazzy software. So in some cases, there is that really obvious trade read across. Outside of that, we're all confident people. Most of us are getters of things done. We don't have a monopoly around that. There are a lot of people, and you only need to look at, the vast amounts of steel and glass towers around here. This place is full of people who can get things done, who can turn up on time, who can wear a suit and polish their shoes. We don't have a monopoly on it as the military. But they do like us. We come in with focus and energy and commitment and enthusiasm. Normally, we're good at handling ambiguity. We're certainly better than a lot of civilians I've seen at being fairly certain with or fairly comfortable with uncertainty, because we've grown up around that sort of thing. So we have a lot of transferable skills. And I might steal my own sandwiches now. So I'm just quickly flicking through my slides. So the way I see it on the transferable skills thing, in the Army, we talk a lot about, and in the military, KSE, knowledge, skills, and experience. All right. You come to insurance from a military career with a lot of skills and experience. Your skills are transferable. Your experience is valuable. You come with very little knowledge. Your challenge to an employer is to demonstrate that you can increase that knowledge very quickly so you can start being a revenue gaining asset for that employer. One example of that is the fact that you get posted every 2 years or 3 years. You pick up a new job. You go from staff job to training job to being back in the regiment to being a Purbright to being, an instructor, whatever it is. Okay. And so one of your skills is actually being able to gain new knowledge quickly and put it to use. So I'd say that that's something you need to keep in your pocket. When you put it like that to an employer, they kind of get it. I think that's quite a pithy little explanation.
Sorry to interrupt, yep. Ben. Just quite conscious of time, so having to move through this a little quicker than we would have liked. But
okay.
There's a few questions come through. No need to apologise. I can share the slides with everybody after, so they can have a proper read through. But so just sort of generally about the internship and about Lloyds Military Network, would you say you're only there to support those who are seeking work, or do you continue to assist people who've maybe recently started a career in the industry and are just looking for networking and advice?
Yeah, so I've sort of jumped onto the internship. All right, so what the internship is, I've already described it as 2 months. We run 2 a year, and that's one of our strands of business, which is basically transition. Our other 2 strands are networking and charitable. We can leave charitable out of this conversation. But we are there for service leavers in transition and serving reservists. And we don't consider transition to be the point at which you got your first job. We consider transition to be maybe something that takes 3 years and doesn't necessarily end with your first job. It might end with your second or third job. And I regularly am in touch with my colleagues and peers in the insurance network, networking within the network and out with the network for my next job. Networking never stops. So we're there to support you out of the military as best we can. We have no money. We're all about reputation and goodwill. But we're there to continue to support each other at that point. Once you've got your first job, you're a success story. And you then don't pull up the ladder. You then look behind you at people coming out behind you. But you also then are part of the pool of people that talk to each other about opportunities and continue to support each other as we go through our second career.
Great, thank you. So that leads us on nicely to the slide about the internship, which I guess links to the Insight Day as well. If you wanted to give a quick overview.
Yeah, sure. So you can apply by going to www.Lloyds Military Network, or you can apply by the CTP. We do 2 a year, 1 in the spring and 1 in the autumn. They're 2 months each, roughly. We'll take your CV anytime. Then you can come up to London. We'll review your CV and come up to London for some interviews or do them on the phone. Normally you'll meet 3 or 4 of us. We want to get to know you, be sure of what you're about, understand that you've got some commitment, enthusiasm, you've done the research, etc., and that you can support yourself over the placement. We don't want you living in a box under Waterloo Bridge, for 2 months just to get on the placement.
Great. And what proportion of veterans who sort of enter the internship then go on to gain employment in the industry?
Sure. So the last time we did the maths on this, which was late last year, we've got an 80% intern to job conversion rate. So 8 out of 10, which I think is pretty powerful. And why is that? Selecting quality people, putting them in the right place once we've got to know them. That's why it's important to meet a few of us. You get the right person in the right job, and you line it up successfully, you're going to get success.
Great, thank you.
So do you want to go? I think, Esme, we've covered sort of the next slide, advantages of the internship. Clearly, I didn't mention that you're mentored through it, so we give you a mentor. So we get you a placement, we get you a mentor, we get you an instant network. You get experience without expectation. You can come and talk to us all the time with ideas and ask questions. You can do that in the firm as well. And of course, you're then talking to people who've got no military background in a market firm, who know when jobs are coming up, when opportunities and openings are occurring. You're in the environment, you're really well placed then to exploit that and find yourself a place.
And is the internship only available to people who have left the military or in transition, or open to everybody?
Yeah, so we prioritise those in transition, okay? It's not exclusively available to those in transition. We will put serving reservists on it. We have done so. But the main focus is those in transition, then serving reservists. And then if you need to, after you've done a job, if you want to go and do the internship because you're struggling to take that next step in your career, but I haven't seen that happen yet. That's something we've thought about, but we've never done. The primary focus is to get people out of the 3 services into the internship and get them jobs. Great,
thank you. And obviously you've had quite a lot of successes through the network. So
yeah, that slide now needs updating, Esme. There's far more there's far more now than are on that slide. I'm really pleased to say.
Good.
And some of those individuals are, and in fact, there's people there from, I'm just looking. So there's guys from the Navy and from the military there. You'll notice that some of them are still, some of them are ex-military. On the left-hand side, Greg Hall is a major in the Honourable Artillery Company. On the right, second from the top, Dex Bransby was a captain in the logistics. He's now a captain. He's now a major, actually. He's been promoted in the reserves. So good presence from the reserves as well. Also, LEs, soldiers, direct entry officers. Really important to say, insurance is not an officer sport. It's here for everyone. I could update that now with a sergeant from the REME who's at Marsh. There's another guy called George Dagnall who's just started at Lockton. He was a corporal in the Rifles. He's now broking. So lots of opportunity for the whole thing.
And are there any options to conduct sort of smaller, shorter placements, unpaid rather than sort of the full internship?
Okay, so what's been happening recently in the market actually is that a number of firms have come forward saying they want to do their own veterans programs. Marsh, I'm going to go and have dinner with the CEO of Marsh next week to talk about how much he needs to invest in his veterans program. That's an opportunity. Recently, the Lloyds Military Network presented at Chubb, which is an underwriting firm, at their military day. And I mentioned Aviva earlier. I'm talking to Aviva about their military program now. So there's opportunities out with the military network, but all of these firms somehow seem to come and ask us what they need to do. And when they do that, we try and seek synergies with them. So, for example, if you go and do the Chubb Insight Day, as opposed to our Insight Day, which is always in early June, and you're not successful with Chubb, then come and talk to us, and we'll find someone else you can go and be successful with. So there's a growing network within the market now.
And I think there's just been a bit of confusion. Can you confirm whether the internship starts in September or the CV, SIFT and interviews start in September?
Yeah, so the internships start in sort of February, March time to be nailed down, and September, October again to be nailed down. CVs for the February, March should be coming in now. We want to see you. I'm interviewing already. I've seen about 5 people this year already. And then, if you're aiming for the autumn one, the timeline's a bit more relaxed. But if you're aiming for the autumn one, you need to be thinking about hitting that Insight Day via the Lloyds Military Network website when the details go up for that Insight Day.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Ben. I'm sorry to sort of rush through the last few slides. As I mentioned, I send the slides to all those interested and share contact details so everybody is connected. But before we finish up, is there any sort of last words of advice you'd like to share? Any top tips or things people must do?
Not really. I think the main one is be yourself. You hear that in the Army a lot. My experience is the Army. I'm sure you hear it in all the services. You can't pretend to be something you're not, either to yourself, your family, or your future employer. So do that assessment, understand who you are, make sure it's right for you, and then be yourself, shine through, and there's no doubt you'll be successful. If there are other things that people want, I don't know, Esme, if you're showing the final slide, but my email address is there. And in the danger of, what was it, 71 people, Esme, is that right?
Yeah, we've had a very popular webinar tonight, one of the best yet. So
okay, so
industry.
I'm flirting with being overloaded here, but if you can go and visit the Military Network website. If you've got something specific, I'll endeavour to email you back with answering your questions. And if there's anything further that people want to know when they reflect on this afterwards, then the door's open. Brilliant.
Well, thank you, Ben, for your time. Obviously, I'll share everything with everyone, but just to let everybody know, our next webinar, Tuesday the 29th, is Opportunities with Jacobs and Turner and Townsend, for anybody interested. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and for Ben for your time. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Brilliant. Good night.
Hi, everybody.